We're in the Rambam, in the laws of Deios. This is the last chapter, chapter 7. We just finished the first halacha, which speaks about the prohibition to negative commandment, to talebear. Talebearing is a Torah violation. And the ramifications of talebearing, ultimately what it could bring about. Now it goes to explain specifically what is talebearing. Ezu rochil. What is a rochil? Rochil is somebody normally is a peddler. Zeh shetoin dvorim v'holech mizeh lezeh. He's a transmitter of information from one person to the next. You know, he broadcasts information, what's going on in the community. He says, so and so said this. This is what I heard about so and so. Al pishu emes, although what he's saying is the truth. He says, did you hear? So and so was just convicted. He's a thief. So and so was just indicted. So and so is this. This person, by sharing this kind of information, although it's true, but since all the information is negative and it has no constructive value, this person ultimately is contributing to the destruction of the world. But there's something even more severe than transmitting information which is true, which is negative. Admod, he says it's a great sin, greater sin to a great degree. But it's included in the same negative commandment. What is lashon hara? When you speak negatively about a fellow Jew, although what you're saying is the truth, but if you say something which is false about another Jew, which is what we call slander, you slander a person, that means you're spreading false information about a person. This is even more severe. Lashon hara is one sits and says, so-and-so did this, which is the truth. He comes from a family of criminals, which is nothing to be proud of. He's sharing information, although it's true, but it reflects negatively, or it's something which the person would prefer nobody knows. Kaka shemati olav. What he hears, what he shares, it's something which is negative, something which is just besmirching, something which is actually diminishes the person in other people's eyes. As the Omar HaKosov, Yachres Hashem kol sifsich halakos. God should cut off those who are glib-lipped. Loshem medaberes gdolos. People talk tall tales. Somebody always says what to say, what to share. You know, people, unfortunately, they have a gift of gab. But very often the gift of gab, a lot of that gab is bad stuff. It's toxic, it's infectious, and it's destructive. The Gemara tells us, Talmud tells us, that let's say a person comes from converts, and there's nothing wrong with being a convert, and he's a devout Jew, but he would prefer that nobody should know that he's a convert. And you share with people, by the way, do you realize he's a convert? Since the person immediately, when other people hear he's a convert, he's seen in a negative light. He's not so-called from the tribe initially, and it affects him negatively, even though he's not diminished. But if he's pained by you sharing this information with others, you're in violation of speaking lashon hara. You're not permitted to share that information. It's not only the issue of confidentiality, it's because what it does to that person. Therefore, you're not permitted to share it or to say it to other people. Person's a Baal Tshuva. Person is a penitent. You're not permitted to say what he was at one time because he preferred nobody knows that. Because it's not something he's proud of. If he says he gives you permission, there's nothing wrong with it. He wants to encourage other people to believe that there's hope, regardless of how far you've fallen, you still could come back. And he tells people, you share it to give other people encouragement to make corrections in their life, regardless of where they are. It's not a problem. You're permitted. But if he doesn't give permission, then you're not permitted. There's a famous story with the Chofetz Chaim. He was traveling on a train. The Chofetz Chaim, he did not wear rabbinic garb. So if you would see him, you wouldn't know he's a rabbi, except he had a beard. Many Jews had beards. And, latter part of the 19th century, 20th century, and he's traveling on the train, and the train is headed towards Vilna. And there's a farmer that's sitting next to Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim, before Shoshana, he would do tshuva for 40 minutes of Bidul Torah, of not utilizing his time properly regarding Torah study. And he's sitting on the train, 3 hours, this farmer's next to him. He's telling him about his cows and how he milks them, how he gets up and how he sells the milk and how he feeds the chickens. And the Chofetz Chaim is very attentive during this 3-hour conversation. Here, a man that every moment is precious beyond our understanding, and yet he's listening, being attentive, even interacting with the person, asking questions about his barn and this. All of a sudden, they're nearing Vilna, and the farmer looks out the window, and he sees throngs of people waiting for somebody to get off the train. So he realized there must be some kind of dignitary on the train. So he says to the Chofetz Chaim, are you aware there's some kind of dignitary, a special person on this train? He says, I have no idea. And all of a sudden, the train pulls into the Vilna train station. People come on into the cab of the Chofetz Chaim, and they lift him up and they carry him off. And he looks out the window, he realizes this man must be somebody special. Thousands of people are waiting to greet him. Then he finds out he's the world-renowned Chofetz Chaim who's been chewing his ear off about the cows and the chickens and the chicken feed and the milking. He goes and he begs forgiveness. How did he waste the Chofetz Chaim precious time, wasting his time talking to him all about all this nonsense, where he could have been preoccupied and immersed in Torah study? So the Chofetz Chaim says, you can't imagine what kind of pleasure I had speaking to you. Other people speak to me. The first thing they do, they start speaking about people, something which is negative. The moment that happens, I have to shut them down immediately. Pleasure, the chickens, the feed, the milking. At 3 hours, it was pleasure to listen to all that. No negativity. That's the story with the Chofetz Chaim. Anything which you share, which is negative about anything, whether it's about a community, individual, that immediately, it's Torah violation. You're not permitted even if you feel it's coming down the pike, you have to say, as the Chofetz Chaim says, excuse me, you're going to share something. Does it have any relevance to me? Does it have any constructive value? And if the person says it does, so you start listening a little bit. The moment you hear it doesn't, you shut him down. And if he says it doesn't, I say, then I'm not listening. Because if that's the case, you're not permitted to share it. And you're not permitted to say it. That's the way the Chofetz Chaim would deal with these issues. Very often people get into a conversation, say, I'd like to tell you something. First thing, what are you going to tell me? Something that it's important for me to hear, to know about. Well, I think it's important. Why is it important? Because is it about someone? Yes. Why do I have to know about that person? Person says, I'm trying to talk to you. You give me an interrogation. Before I open my mouth, you're interrogating me. What am I saying? The answer is I have to give you an interrogation. Because if not, I'll be the victim and you'll be the victim. Because I contributed to your giving you the outlet where to say something negative about another Jew.
I want to order those 3-roll specials. I'd like to take it out. I'll wait if I can.
On roads, and sometimes they have to open the road. So you have a thing called the jackhammer. You don't see it much around any longer, but you see people working with jackhammers, opening up. Today it's really asphalt, but at one time when it was concrete, you needed a jackhammer. You had to break open that cement, the concrete. So the person who worked the jackhammer, when he would work on it, his whole body would vibrate. Could you imagine vibrating for half an hour at a time straight? When he stopped working, he'd be shaking. because it was like such a traumatic experience. He was like being shaken up for the period of time. And he wears certain ear coverings on his ears because actually it could affect his hearing. The noise of that jackhammer could diminish his hearing. But let's say he didn't protect his ears. And people say, you know, something, I don't think it's a good idea. You should really cover your ears. Person says, I hear perfectly. But he doesn't realize it. Cumulatively speaking, over time, he's become hard of hearing because his ears are being abused by this exceptional level of noise. You speak Lashon Hara. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You don't feel the effects. Someday you're going to feel the effects. That information going through your ears into your brain will bring about such consequences, you'll regret you ever listened to it. It's like the guy who worked on jackhammer, he was told to put on ear coverings to protect his hearing. Today, he's stone deaf. He regrets he never covered those ears. Someday, when you understand what Lashon Hara is, when you hear negative information of the person, in retrospect, you say, I regret I even listened. I shouldn't have listened. But you realize it's too late by then. Unless the person does tshuva and he has forgiveness from the person who had spoken about, as we said earlier, he's not forgiven. So you really regret that you crossed that line because you thought you knew better and you thought it was innocuous. It was nothing. It was plenty serious.